you for this opportunity. With the recent announcement of the ARPA-style high-risk funding body, which will be known as ARIA, the astronomy and geophysics community would like to understand what is meant by high-risk research and how it's going to coexist with existing research bodies in the UK.
We'll go to Greg first, then Carol, then Catherine, then Dawn. Greg.
Well, thanks, Anya. It's a great question, and we would like to know the answer to that as well. We've conducted an inquiry into this, as you've probably seen, once we knew that the government was committed to this. And just to kind of reflect on our conclusions, we think it's a good thing that the government's putting more money into science, and £800 million is a lot of money, and it can definitely be put to good use, given the breadth of scientific talent and opportunity we have. We do think there's a case for having an organisation with a kind of culture that is a bit different from the research councils and UKRI, Innovate UK. That's not a criticism of them, because they're the foundation of our scientific excellence. But they do have procedures that they go through. They make, as you will know, you probably participate in, calls that reflect certain priorities. And so the idea of somewhere in the system that we have to have an organisation that's a bit different and perhaps doesn't need to demonstrate in such a watertight way what its results are going to be or what its prospective impact is going to be, we think is valuable. But, and two buts I'd say before colleagues will come in. The first is that £800 million is still a lot of money, so we do need to know that it's going to be money well spent, even if it's not going to be spending quite the same way as it would be by the research councils. And secondly, even £800 million, if you spend it on 800 different projects, you're probably not going to get a huge breakthrough. So we think we should know a bit more about what its purpose is, and we don't. So we are having, if you're interested, as you clearly are, we're having another evidence session next Wednesday, a week today, 9:30 on Wednesday morning, which should be fascinating because we've got Dominic Cummings, whose idea it was in the first place, and Kwasi Kwarteng, who is now the Secretary of State responsible, one after the other. So we hope by the end of that session we'll have an answer to your question, Annie, but we don't have it just yet.
Thank you, Greg. Carol?
Anya, thanks very much for the question. And can I say I've got two daughters called Murren and Neve, both spelled in Irish ways, so totally get where you're coming from. Yeah, it's interesting because what we know, and researchers have told us, that filling out research grants is a lengthy, it's time consuming, it takes up more time often than the research itself. And the funding, the awards of funding is often done in a very risk-averse way. There are so many checks and balances, constant, having to meet targets and having to come up to scratch. So this idea that there's something that allows research to take place, possibly in a bit more freely, is something that could have some merit. As Greg says, we've done an inquiry on this, and the question that kept coming up was, what is it we're trying to do with this? What is the project? And what I would say is it's been quite interesting if we see the amount of money that's been thrown at COVID vaccinations, for example, research into that. We can see that actually if you throw money at something in an intense way, actually you can get rewards. But along the way, you have to accept that there's going to be failure as well. And I think this is the idea of this high risk situation is, yes, you can throw money at it, but you might not actually get any decent results out of it. So the idea that it can tolerate failure, I think, is quite important, and is one that hasn't probably featured in research grants for quite a long time. But what's it for? We don't know. Maybe we'll find out next week.
Catherine.
I won't repeat what Greg and Carol have said, but as you may, as will be an emerging theme from this, we do actually genuinely collaborate on the Science and Technology Select Committee and enjoy it at the same time. So let me take your question off in a different direction. What could have been considered high risk and could, to give you an idea, I've been doing a bit of thinking. So for example, the fusion torus. How many years have we been talking about fusion as a potentially clean energy generating source? That's at least 4 decades. I mean, we've got exciting research going on in Oxford, and they phone up the national grid and say, we're just about to take 23 megawatts out your system, please, which is, I think, a small town. And then they turn it on and they smash hydrogen together, produce helium and harness the energy. That's the kind of thing for me, and really long burn stuff that translates from the theoretical into the practical. And the other thing that's high risk is combining interdisciplinary research. So how are we going to solve the problems of the future is not the biology department not talking to the computing department, because the advances that we're taking in data is really going to allow us to understand the complexity within molecular structures. Some of the AI stuff to predict from RNA sequences what the folding patterns are going to be for receptors, which is coming forward in COVID. That's a direct collaboration, but we've not solved that problem in the 100 years since we discovered it. So, and it's still not solved. So that's my definition of high risk. And I tell you what, I'd love to hear is your thoughts on what's so high risk that needs looking at.
Are you asking me to answer that now?
Well, let Dawn go first.
Yeah, good.
We'll let Dawn go first and then come back.
Have a think.
So one of those buts I think that Greg said probably was relating to me, because I've gone from being I couldn't see the point in this ARPA and then ARIA. I couldn't see it. Like I couldn't see what the problem was that we were trying to solve or where the direction of travel was. I just didn't get it. So to me, it didn't make sense. But that's the good thing, I suppose, about being on the Science and Technology Committee and taking evidence, is that you get to listen to what everybody's got to say. You get to listen to other people's experiences. And so from that, I've kind of moved a little bit more into the middle, from the I don't see the point of it to, okay, I see the point of investing in science, of course, and not having somebody breathe down your neck so that you can experiment. I understand that, and I also understand, like we're going to get the top scientists, for instance, involved in ARIA. I suppose the issue for me is, do I trust the government and the process? So do I trust having very little oversight of contracts that were given during the pandemic, for instance, and knowing that some of the contracts were poorly given? Do I trust that this £800 million will go to the leading scientists, or will that be filled with lots of biases of who the leading scientists are? And is it the same old people rather than going to the up and coming people with great burning bright ideas, and and the women and the diversity in the science community are often ignored? So do I trust that it will go in that direction, or will it go to Dominic Cummings' mates? Maybe I'll ask him that next week. I don't know. So I'm kind of moved from where I was to being informed, a lot more informed because of the committee, but I'm not quite at the, it's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
Thanks, all. So Anya, on that question that Catherine put, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's actually quite well timed. I don't know if you guys saw about the meteorite that fell last week. I was part of the team that collected some from the field. Most exciting thing to happen in my career, probably ever. Like, I think everything's downhill from now on. But as a meteoriticist, I fall in the kind of gap between the UK Space Agency and STFC, especially because I study Martian meteorites. One says you should be in a UK Space Agency and the other says STFC, which means my PhD is actually funded by a bequest to the university because we couldn't get funded from a research council. However, the excitement about this meteorite has been stratospheric, excuse the pun. But perhaps something like a better camera network, perhaps a low Earth orbit satellite to watch out for these things when they fall, because we've just shown, hey, if we get one, that's amazing. But the high risk is we don't know when the next meteorite is going to hit the UK. So for me, that would be the dream, because what we've shown is everyone's got so excited about this first one in 30 years, and I get to study it
We
next
don't want to be the next set of velociraptors, do we? Oh, what's that? Bang. Thanks, Anya.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very